Brady, what's happening, man?
Hey, how we doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I got to be honest, this is going to be the first episode in a long time that I've come in here unscripted. And more so because you and I just spent a lot of years together, man. And I feel like this is just an everyday conversation for us. We're just hitting the record button. So it's going to be fun. And just looking forward to bringing your wealth of knowledge and experience to our audience here.
Yeah, I know it's probably a little. I think we've had these conversations about this isn't in the office anymore. This isn't closed door. Like, here we go. Like, I just took the gloves off and I'm saying what I want to say. It's like as soon as you push record, you're like, oh man, now I'm on the hot seat. I gotta not say what what's really ruminating in my mind right now. But I'll try. I'll try.
All right, well, we'll keep it light here. We'll keep it light here. But what I really want to do here, and I think is be really great for the audience, is you've had a fantastic career thus far, and still more to do, more to come. And so, what I really like to do is relative to the world of sports. You spent a long time across a wide variety of environments, teams, sports, environments. I think it's just really important to just let's just start at the beginning, and rather than typically a guest comes on and we say, hey, like, what's your origin story? I want to kind of know where you've come from. What I want to do with you is let's just double click in each segment, because you kind of done this cool circle of life moment where you're back where you started originally, not in the same city but similar environment. So, and that's been, I think, what we were talking earlier, 12, 15 years. So let's go back to your early days at Weber State. Kind of give us some insight there, and let's just talk about the sports environment there, what you were doing there, and then we'll make our way through the NBA and back to the college setting.
Yeah, I mean, even the Weaver State stuff felt like it was two stints there. You know, my undergrad, playing some sports there. It's my backyard of where I grew up, so it felt like a job because we have an athletic trainer there who's been running the show. He's about to retire, I think, this year after like literally 50 years. So like, if you can envision being an athletic trainer in one spot for that long, like it felt like I was working there as a student. Um, but really, we missed a spot. I mean, I right out of undergrad went straight into the D League. That's where
Wow.
yeah. So I mean, that's where KY and I first met. Kevin Young was a first time young head coach. He's about the same age as myself, but I remember we were both looking at each other, going, "Are they crazy? Like, you're giving me the head coach job, and they're giving me the head athletic trainer job, and we're both just like." Okay, I think it's laughable now. I mean, because now he's back into the same almost area where that team was in Provo. But dude, we were one game away from making it to the finals that year. Like, they just gave two young guys a chance. But man, that was a lot of fun. Unbeknownst to both of us, the team was folding the next year, so that's kind of why they went a much more affordable route in that final year. But we had a lot of fun. But yeah, it kind of started there, and then after that, when the team officially did go kind of collapse, this is when I landed back at Weber State again.
What this shows your age in this comment. I don't know if anyone picked up on it. You were in the D League, which is no longer the name of the current G League of the NBA, the development league. So back then, you've told me these stories time and time again, whether it's been over a beer, an old fashioned, or whatever we might be getting into the shenanigans on the road. But could you give me one of the stories that you've shared with me as your experience of what your role really was like in the D League at the time?
Wow, yeah. So the few stints, but that first one was a sure an eye opener where you think you're going to become a title of like this good looking head athletic trainer, when it's really you're the only athletic trainer. You're also the equipment manager, you're the bus driver, you're the strength coach, you're the team ops. I mean, this was the D League at the time, where now it's the G League. Very well organized, and every team has their own affiliate that's owned, operated, and it's a lot different now with a lot more rules and regulations with bigger staff. At this time, there was 12. There were 12 teams. This is the ABA before there was the merger in the NBA. This is like the Jackie Moon, Will Ferrell days of what it felt like. And so, I mean, you were truly a one-stop shop, everything. The crazy part is you'd think that it's important to be the athletic trainer. Like, you would think that's still the number one priority. it's not when you actually look at the actual hands-on work that comes with it. So I mean, you really felt like an equipment manager first and foremost, like setting up, breaking down laundry from a time commitment. And so all those little things that you just don't expect to be handed to you and that needs to get done kind of shows you actually why there's quite a bit of turnover in that level in that league, because to multitask and wear so many hats, you kind of realize that either this is not what I signed up for, or this is an industry and a job that I just don't think that I was really ready to do at this level, which is okay. One way or another, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and a lot about what it really is versus what it's marketed as.
What was maybe looking back at it now when you were young, and I didn't realize it was, I forgot about the first stint before you went back to Weber State. When you were at that first stint in the D League at the time, looking back at it now, like how do you feel like those experiences shapes you to, which we'll get into, the opportunities that led down the road?
I don't think I would trade them for anything. I think that 1 year with some of those guys, the year that we had, I mean, you and I probably can still tell people that finals year, the personality and like the actual like the vibe and the fingerprint of what that team makeup was special. You know what I mean? From top to bottom, it just made sense. That's exactly how my first year was. So it was incredible, but it was also in some regards very misleading because one, the team just gelled. Like I mean, every which way they hung out together. Like it was roughing it for sure. Like I mean, the road trips and stuff. I just got back from a trip in Reno where I hadn't been there in 10 years, and some of the places that I just the nostalgia of playing blackjack, just certain things, just some of the stories I had with some amazing, amazing people on that team. They're still some of my closest friends. And, even then, now thinking about it, like how our age is showing, one of them, our point guard, is now the head coach at UNLV, and his name's Kevin Kruger. I mean, it's crazy to see how fast time flies. But at that time, man, we had so much fun. We really did. And it was very telling to me to learn a lot about myself because I knew that I was built for this. Like I loved every aspect of it, and I knew that I could do hard things. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I do know that I was willing to kind of take it, day by day. And I know, you know my wife very well, but she'll say that still to this day, like, I mean, I would think about it now, man, we had just got married. We just bought a house. We're living in Ogden, and I'm commuting every day to Provo, which is almost an hour and a half one way, like one way. And we're dealing with the winter season where the snow's in Utah. So I'm like, really, it's 2 hours one way drive. And dealing with the laundry stuff, I would bring it home and do the guy's laundry in our house. Brand new washer and dryer machine we got for our wedding gifts. I'm like, my wife is livid. She's like, this is not the happening. I'm just doing it, like not asking questions, just taking slaps on the wrist because I'm like, well, I mean, you won't ever see me if I stay and do the laundry out there. So little things like that. It was a lot, and I'm happy to say what I was paid because it just goes to show, looking back now, the conversations you and I've had and doing hiring processes, candidates, all the things you and I have gone through and seen at a whole different level. I was paid $18,000 for a 6-month season. That's what I made, and it was one of the funnest years I've probably seasons I've ever had.
I agree with probably it being one of the more fun seasons you've had because I remember as we started advancing in the careers, as working our time in Phoenix here is what we're referring to. Brady and I were together at Phoenix for several years, and Atlanta before that too. As you took on more roles and responsibilities, some days you're just like, man, I wish I could just go back to the dog days of some of those earlier roles of my career. So I definitely remember that with you. We D League, fantastic. Let's say thank you to your wife for allowing you to do the laundry at the house. I did not know that story. I learn something new about these stories every time. It's fantastic. So we go from the D League, you circumvent, not having to look for a job too far, and you end up at Weber State, which is back in Utah. And so so now you go from the D League, and now you're in the college setting, which was, tell us the years that you were there, because it's definitely a different landscape than it is currently now. Let's go there on the next stop in this journey.
Yeah, so I mean, I was pretty fortunate to still have those ties. I think Weber State was proud of me to kind of land into a professional role like that. It reflected well on them, and Yeah, it's pretty fortunate to have those relationships there because as soon as they kind of heard what was going on, it was kind of like, hey, we'll create a position for you, like come back. And it was kind of working, of course, over under the same head athletic trainers, named Joel Bass, and just basically opened the doors for me. And not just that, but like, with my time there as a student, he basically just said, here's the keys to football, men's basketball. Like he was kind of everything was under his umbrella and direction, and he did that. He's done it for 50 years. I have no idea how somebody for that many years has gone football season finish straight into men's basketball season finish, and then it's kind of just like it's wild at the same time being the director of the entire operation. So but that's kind of what it was like. And not just that, at this time, my story of a very undersized guy who's competitive and trying to fight for every inch and edge I can get. So I always lived in the weight room. And so at that time, you also know this, but the listeners don't. There's a reason I didn't go into the physical therapy route because 20 years ago, I didn't feel like it had what I was looking for. It didn't give me the itch like it does now. Like I think the curriculums as you've gone through it and others, it's a lot more versed in integrating biomechanics, strength and conditioning. And I'm not saying it didn't always, but I just at the time it made more sense to me to do sports medicine and the athletic training route and stay closely associated to sports and then just add the strength and conditioning component to it that I knew. And so that's kind of what happened at that phase. Now I'm kind of getting more into the CSCS. And so that role, honestly, was similar to the G League. It was like, hey, you're coming back. You've got the two biggest teams on campus, but you're dueling this as a strength coach and athletic trainer. So it gave me a lot of exposure to not only a lot of valuable reps with collision sports and, basketball, which at the time was king at Weber State. Weber State's basketball team was winning year after year after year because we had Damian Lillard and some amazing athletes there. But so yeah, it was just like I just landed in my backyard home. Obviously, I'm not commuting an hour and a half anymore. I'm basically 5 minutes away, and it was amazing for 3 years. It was 2011 to 14.
And then from 2011, after 2014, where was the next stop after that?
It was a blip on the radar, actually, that some have found. And I was on a podcast earlier this year, and Sasha is the lady who found it and brought it up to me. And I was like, oh, I didn't think we were going this route. And most people, I don't want to, it's not that I'm hiding anything, but most people don't want to hear that you went pro, college, high school. So I actually was a high school teacher and covering my high school that I went to for a short period of time. And honestly, I'll just explain it as best as this. But those 3 years at Weber State led to the first ever time I had experienced like actual burnout. Like those 3 years, and why I don't know how Joel Bass has done it for 50 at Weber State. Because when I did three, again, I'm young, young marriage, and it was just one after another. And I don't think I took a day off. I felt bad. Like I kind of self-destructed internally to feel bad to ask for a day off or things. And so when you're doing dual roles and two teams that are basically year round, after 3 seasons, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I've always felt almost like a father figure to my brother. We're 10 years difference in age. And at this point, he's going into his senior year of high school and played a lot of sports. And I felt like I was ready for something different. And so here comes the high school offering me a teaching job, summers off, but also the athletic training role to cover at that school. So like I was actually getting offered more money to have 3 months off. And it was just like, I was just ready. So it was Bonneville High School is where I did. And it was another opportunity that I'll never forget because my mom still runs into some of these kids that were in my classes, like sports med classes that will come and grab her. And it was really impactful, and so I really enjoyed that, and it was a very quick experience. I was enjoying it, but before I knew it, the Utah Jazz came calling again with the news that they were buying a team, which is kind of now where we've gotten to with the G League. And so it was not even a year I was at the high school before the Jazz came calling again.
And so then I did not know you taught. Maybe I did. It had to have come up in conversation, but
I've
I do.
100% told you that the thought dawned on me because when this came to being a real thing, I was like, dude, society is ruined as we know it, that they're offering me a teaching job. I was like, something's wrong with the universe.
Potentially. And from the from the high school teaching, you know, you said the Utah Jazz went calling. And so at this time, what we're talking 2020, trying to keep my dates here, we're talking
It was
2015,
still
right?
around 14, 15 when
Okay.
the
So
Jazz
then get
called.
calling from the Utah Jazz, and that's where you jumped in back into the D League at the time. And what was the role there with the D League?
Very similar, but this time now, instead of it being independently owned, it was being bought. It was a team that was already operating called the Idaho Stampede. It was in Boise. And so the Jazz were buying it, but they still had a couple year lease on playing in their arena down there, downtown Boise by the university, which, by the way, another amazing time in my life. Like Boise was the first time I'd ever moved full time out of the state of Utah. But it was a great opportunity because the Jazz were like, "Hey, 6 months out of the year, you're with us. You know, like you're in the locker room, in the training room. You're covering games. You're going to summer league, doing all these things." It was just kind of like the next step up opportunity for me to learn at that level. And it was again another dual role because I was kind of getting close with their strength and conditioning staff. So it was like, where does Brady fit? And it's like wherever he can help, you know. So it was like starting the day off, setting up weight rooms and lifts and programs with those guys, and then it was going straight into treatments. But that was about half the season, whereas the other half they would send me off to Boise and I would run their G League team. And so it was very similar to what it was before. At this time, it still was the D League, I think, for maybe another season before it truly unveiled that the Gatorade was being a big partnership incorporated. And so still same old stuff, man. 6 months out of the year, I'm one stop shop. I'm driving the buses. I got pictures of these things, dude. I'm telling you, this is where stories get real fun because I can vividly see it in my head now. I'm on the freeway, and Boise's another, winter ski town type thing, and it's snow. And I'm driving to a YMCA, which is where we practice. Like I said, this isn't glory at all. Like, it is glorious, but like it's these facilities is nothing special. So I'm driving and like it's training camp, and I mean we've got a short bus, like a legit short bus. It's wrapped. It looks like the team colors and everything, but it had like above the driver's seat one of those plexiglass windows where you could like put advertisement and stuff. I got 19 guys in this short bus. Like it's all shoulder to shoulder. The seats are filled. They're standing, holding the railing, and all of a sudden it was so windy this one day that the wind blew out this plexiglass. So like it shatters. Shards are just raining on me. I mean, it feels like a Chris Farley scene. I'm swerving in the freeway. I got professional athletes that are 7 feet just hanging on by the railings. And I'm just sitting here thinking I'm killing these guys for sure. We're going off the side. And it was like, that was just one of a few memories I have there in Boise that was just like, I have a picture of the bus and like getting out thinking I hit something, a bird or something, but it was just the wind. But I definitely was like the professional bus driver for a number of years in the minor leagues.
I'm glad you brought up this story because I love hearing it every time you tell it. I love you just sharing these perspectives because all the time, and I know you do too. Uh, hey, how do I work in sports? What's it like? Where, what's the pathways to get there? And just sharing the experiences of the D League the first time, and then the D League into the G League. And yes, it's technically a pro sports league, but it's also a very underserved back then and under resourced relative to the staff. So it just
Mm-hmm.
provides color. Definitely things are different, a little bit different now with a lot more teams bringing those G League teams closer to market, which is nice. But it's I appreciate you sharing that story relative to the actual role in the environment, right? How would you compare, or if there is even a comparison, the first stint you had versus the second stint, right? We're talking almost a couple of years. What was the progress of maybe investment or support that you had along the way?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I mean, it made me think because we've always joked, but I've always thought that like when I tell my story, if it was in a book form, it would certainly the title of my book would be called "The Road to Success is Paved in Shit." Like that's essentially what it feels like when you go through some of those really cool opportunities. But I loved it. I mean, I was all for it. I was eating it up and had a good time with it. But some people have a different perspective and timeline of wanting to get to the top nowadays. But it was, thankfully I had that year at the Flash. I was able to kind of get a lot more exposure at Weber State. So at this point, I don't think that I was unprepared as much. I mean, I think it was more the life stressors of like, new place in life in Boise and just kind of getting again at this point not only was I still relatively young in a marriage, but now we just had our daughter Macy. So I'm like, this decision, if you want to hear another short, small story, was like I'm pacing the hallways of the hospital while Macy's, we're expecting Macy any day now. And we're in the hospital now. We're thinking this is go time. And I'm literally, in these few days, I've been in the midst of making a decision. Do I go with the Utah Jazz because they just offered me this job? Or do I go to Cleveland and take a year seasonal paid job with the Cavaliers? And this was a month after LeBron decides he's going back to Cleveland. So you're sitting here going, this guy's leaving Miami Heat. And it was an interesting conundrum where I was like, man, the NBA is calling me, but I've got the Jazz, my hometown team that I love. And it's like, obviously I went with the Jazz just because of, a lot more life things. But yeah, I just so many different blips on the radar going on in my life at that time. But here's Macy now, and we're going to Boise, which is like first time I've ever moved away from home. A little bit of the comfort zone, and now leaving my wife and daughter because my wife, she's not about to just like uproot absolutely everything for a 6-month job to Idaho, and so. There's a lot of back and forth. It's definitely drivable, like 4.5 hours for them to come see me over the weekends, but the role itself was pretty much the same. You know what I mean? You're still one-stop shop. You just new place. You're learning how to do it with all the constraints. And so I was a lot more comfortable this time with it. Things had gotten better with the league and what they offered, but at the same time, it was the same exact thing. I just knew kind of what it entailed a little bit more this time.
So that give a little bit more. Let's give a little bit more color to the model that is definitely more common nowadays. And hearing the Jazz do back that time surprises me. 6 months you're with the NBA team, 6 months you're with the G League. Just because I think it's a great way to build experience and credibility in both spaces, because you get to be autonomous and in the trench, like really deep in the trenches when you're in the G League, working those 6 months, and then you get, to come back, work with the NBA side for 6 months and learn and see what more resources can get you. And then you cycle back and you go back into the trenches. So can you provide a little bit more color, or just share some insights into what that was like? Because I think it's important to highlight that those that are considering, do I want to take the G League job? And well, I think if you hear from someone that lived it for a few years and the pros and cons, I think it might be helpful.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess it's always you wonder where people are at and how they see it, what their perspective is of what they're walking into these roles. Because just like it was for me the first time, is like, here's a good title, a good opportunity, and you think it's something, but it's 99% going to be something else. And so I can also see when they were sending me down there, this was kind of early onset stuff with sports science, where they were sending me down with some early catapult stuff, where they were sending me down to be the guinea pig and try some of these things and see, what works, what doesn't from a practical sense. And so when they would send me down there, I mean, there were some directives and some ideas that we were flirting with from the NBA side of seeing, hey, like, we've got this opportunity now. Let's see what works down there. You know what I mean? And so I do feel like they were probably a little bit of ahead of the curve when it came to trying some of those things, both as a sports medicine model and their staff and their strength and conditioning staff. But they were just good human beings too. So, I mean, it was a little bit for them to learn and see what could possibly work at that level. Cause this like we do, even 10, 15 years ago, I mean, these are NBA players. You don't have a lot of wiggle room to just treat them like a trial and error guinea pig. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to win day by day. And so it gave me a lot of opportunities to see how they not only operate, but just some things that they're looking into forward thinking wise that maybe potentially brought up if it made sense from a practical aspect. So yeah, like it was interesting to me because you did have some autonomy to just go and be the practitioner and learn a little bit on your own, like decision making. And you and I lived it of sending the daily status reports and updates and stuff. It was very similar to that, especially if it was like a guy sent down, like assigned to us from the Jazz. So there was a lot of really good learning curves there that you don't think you would expect just from emails and organization and building things that help you stay very organized. And also you're kind of worrying a little bit about how to send those things and make sure that they look good, because you're also trying to improve yourself. You're trying to impress the guys above you and hope that one day, hey, if I do this long enough, I'm going to get my own call up and get a full-time job in the NBA. That's everybody's dream and vision. Sometimes I think that people get a little too close to the sun with that vision of thinking that that's really the end game and what they really want, that they kind of forego the actual work and the journey that comes with it and everything you can learn along the way. And so there's definitely a lot that I learned from those times I would never change, because to your point, it gives you 6 months to be forged with it. And then you got 6 months where you go up there and they're not even, I shouldn't say this, then it's not that they're not thinking of you, but when you go there, they're not worried about you. You're like the seventh guy on the staff that just kind of helps set the day up and do stuff. So you get a lot of different perspectives.
You mentioned eventually, the hope is, when you take on those roles, you end up in the NBA, which you certainly did, and that's where we first got to spend some time together. Was out in Atlanta. So how did you? Because you have a unique story of how you landed that job. How did you land that assistant AT role with the Atlanta Hawks?
Yeah, I mean, our close friend, that we worked with, Scotty Parker, it was really him, and Scotty had just got promoted to be the head athletic trainer for the first time as Art Horn departed to go to the Boston. And, I still really I got a pretty good memory when I try to connect some of these dots, but like where I made an impression on Scotty at a summer league or something, I don't know. I guarantee you I'd probably had one too many drinks when I did. So I don't really quite know. But, during those 3 years of that opportunity before Atlanta came, I was 2 years in Boise. And then the third year was when we officially moved the team to Salt Lake, which is now known as Salt Lake City Stars. But those opportunities, every summer I was at Summer League representing the Jazz, and actually two of those I'd been named like the athletic trainer for the G League select team. They used to have a team in the Summer League that was called a G League select team, where they would build like an all-star team, if you will, of G League players that weren't getting Summer League roster spots with an NBA team. And so, yeah, at some point during those summer leagues, I'd gotten to hang out with Scotty a little bit. We had a good time. And then I didn't see it coming at all out of nowhere. He just called me saying that, when he got promoted to the head athletic trainer's role, that he kind of thought of me as a candidate for the assistant. And then it kind of seemed like it moved pretty quickly, like it was for me. I was like, yeah, let's go. I'm all in. It felt like that first year all over again with the Utah Flash, where I was just like, let's go. And of course, I mean, you know me, I'm not a big city kid by any means necessary, but I was, let's go.
No, I had to. It was also a unique time for you because that your family had decided to stay back in Utah, so you were able to. I can count on you to roll around in Atlanta and cause some trouble on those days off. So you get to Atlanta, assistant AT in Atlanta. I entered the NBA after several years in the MLS, and here you and I are, low men on the totem pole. We're just staff workers first year in the NBA, and then after your first season in Atlanta, you get another phone call that ends up sending you on your way. And then you end up spending several years out in Phoenix and progressing your role through there. So could you provide some context to what led from Atlanta to Phoenix and then the trajectory once you were in Phoenix?
Yeah, another really fun story, but just like Scotty's, like I do think it was that third year that we moved the team to Salt Lake is when it officially was becoming the G League. And during that time, I was covering the G League select teams. Like I was starting to bump shoulders and meet a lot of people in the front office of the G League, like the actual league, the front office of them. And I mean, essentially that was they were team members of the NBA front office. And so I was doing a lot of these cool opportunities, and out of nowhere, they call me and say, "Hey, we want to fly you to Lake Tahoe because Gatorade is going to be a partner. They want to bring in the MBATA, like the NBA's Athletic Training Association, the board members, right? They're the chairman, the secretaries. Those guys, they're going to bring them in. They're also going to bring in the Strength Coach Association." But they started asking a couple of us, I was fortunately one of them, they asked a few of us from the G League to come and be a part of the conversation just because of this partnership becoming a big thing. So I'm sitting here going, holy cow, like, let's go. They let me bring my wife, Emily. We go to Tahoe. Like, I mean, going from the G League and what we had to the lifestyle of the NBA, like you and I have experience of like amazing locations, like 5-star hotels. Like it was amazing. The first time going to Tahoe. And I'm meeting people that I look up to that just like, when you're in my position, you see some of these names of guys who are head athletic trainers and directors and head strength coaches. And, it's kind of like I felt like a little more starstruck by meeting some of them face to face than like actually being in the same weight room, training room with some NBA players. And so I'm in this exclusive little room with about a couple dozen people that I look up to, and I'm just like, man, again, you're like, I don't even know why I'm here, but it's like really cool opportunity. And that's where I met Aaron Nelson, who was, at the time is probably 20 plus years in as a head athletic trainer for the Phoenix Suns, and basically been a pioneer in front of many different things that drove, sports medicine models at a high level in the NBA. So Aaron's wife's there, and my wife and we start just connecting with everybody. But, one of the things is they gave you an opportunity on your day off is you could do one of two things. They'll take you all inclusive care at a spa, like at the hotel, or you can go whitewater rafting. And like 98% of us decided to go whitewater rafting. So we're having a good time, but Emily and I get paired up with Aaron and his wife and Jesse Wright. I mean, Jesse Wright, so Jesse Wright's in this boat too. But like we have a really fun boat and we're having a heyday. But at the very end of this, I mean, sure enough, here come like the Whitewater Rapids, and out of 4 or 5 rafts, all of them make it through this treacherous thing, and we're the last one, and we're the only one that gets flipped. And we got pictures of this thing like mid flip, like we're just getting thrown everywhere. And it was hilarious, but like, that's really where we kind of forged some cool relationships there. And this is right around the time that I'm having conversations with Scotty. So then after that, I'm going to Atlanta, and then wasn't in Atlanta more than 9 months. You know that. I never actually experienced the humid summer because when I joined the team, the summer was ending. And then after the season, we didn't make the playoffs. It was a really quick turnaround where all of a sudden I'm getting a phone call from Aaron Nelson saying, hey, we got an opportunity out here that we're thinking, are you interested? So again, it just goes to show you how when and where you're going to make an impression or kind of a relationship with somebody. And so that's kind of where it started with Phoenix. Is a cool little weekend in a whitewater rafting, getting flipped over, turned into, an opportunity to come to Phoenix to be the head strength coach.
And then first off, I don't think I heard the whitewater rafting story, so I love hearing new stories from you. Second, it's also very important. I just want to call out that like people call it networking, right? And networking is what you need to do to make the connections. And the way you described it didn't feel like networking. It just felt like, okay, like I'm going to be myself and just take care of people and treat people well, right? Right. Sometimes there's this, I mean, I get them all the time on LinkedIn nowadays, like this just, reaching out and, hey, I want to come do this, I want to do that, where yes, that's what it takes. And, sometimes it just, we're losing the value of like that face-to-face time. And so I know you say, yeah, I don't really know how this stuff happened, but just like hearing the stories, again, just goes to highlight like you spend time getting to know people and forging those relationships, which is important. And they've led to some really cool opportunities for you. So, that next one in your long journey over here being the head strength and conditioning coach for the Phoenix Suns, but then that quickly escalated into a different role. So give me a little bit of the trajectory of where you started in Phoenix and then where you ended as far as your tenure over there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you highlight that because I mean, networking is just how we encompass that nowadays. I don't know if I love that phrase either, but when I think of that, to your point, I've raised this to you before. It's like there's different ways of it. And I think of it as the transactional versus transformational. And we live in a very transactional world nowadays in every which way. And it's kind of just how we've gotten programmed to that regard. But I just feel like for me, it's like you just live in life. Like I'm not trying to get anything out of anybody, and if you have that intention, it's like I'm trying to learn as much as I can from everybody. Like I don't walk into any room feeling like I'm the expert. And that. Sometimes that's actually hurt me at a default when I ended up in certain leadership positions and I was a little too collaborative, or I was, trying to learn from others when they're looking at me to make decisions and learn. And so I think that's always just been a very healthy way for me to just approach life and just create relationships, because that's what it is. Like I don't go into anything trying to say, oh, I'm going to buddy up with this person with the intention of like, as soon as I get what I can out of this person, I'm done with them. You know what I mean? But so that's one thing I've always offered as suggestions to people when I talk networking or, mentoring people who want to end up in the NBA. And here's my suggestions. There's a million ways to get there. I think doing it with an authentic lens and kind of being your true self, it'll work out in the end. You know what I mean? And if it doesn't, then you still know yourself well enough to know that you're going to be just fine. So I'm glad you highlight that because that's the reality. But yeah, another blip radar, man. Here we go. I'm coming to Phoenix, and after a year in Atlanta, I remember all of us, you, myself, Scotty, Ronk, we were just having a good hangout session. We're talking, and we started like asking each other, like we played a lot of what if games, like what if scenarios. Some of them we'll never share, but this one was kind of like top NBA destinations. Where would you want to be? And like holistically, like the team, everything. But most of us were thinking of it like as a region. And sure enough, every single one of us, like our top five, I think most of us top three was Phoenix, just because we absolutely loved it, like the weather year round. And so I was one of those. I said it after experiencing it, but then here I end up coming to Phoenix, and I'm excited to learn from Aaron Nelson. And I mean, yeah, it was also here's a slightly different role. Like they really were favoring athletic trainers there, and I think he knew that was my background, but he also knew I had a passion for the strength and conditioning side of things, and so completely different hat. Whereas like outside of Atlanta, that was the first time in Atlanta where I wasn't playing this multi dual role bus driver, equipment manager. It was kind of similar, but now 9 months later, it's a strength coach. And so I think what I liked about Aaron was he was truly trying to find this model where there was fluidity, you know what I mean? Like there wasn't silos, and you and I've had great conversations around silos. They work obviously because that's what most of us are operating within if done well, but I think he was trying to break down those walls about like this wall is here from the weight room to the training room intentionally because they do their thing, we do ours. Like he was trying to come up with something that really worked well, and I think he always tried to have that vision. And so worked really well. I mean, I had a great time. I went into it once again trying to learn as much as I can. I also don't like the phrase imposter syndrome, but that feeling of what is explained as imposter syndrome, where it's like, am I really ready for this as like a lead role, and I'm leading the programming and I'm making decisions, and well, you would have thought yes after all the experience I had at different levels with the autonomy and the G League and stuff. But like now I'm sitting here going, how did I get here? And I'm trying to figure it all out. But it was amazing, man. It was amazing. But another quick blip on the radar where I'm there another season, which is 9 months. We got more change getting thrown at us. So yeah, I don't know where you want to start there because that was a 19 win season with the youngest team in the NBA, and the average age group was 19 years old. So like there's a lot of up and downs for sure that year.
Yeah, no, I imagine there were, and the night I didn't realize how young the average age in that roster is. I mean, but looking back at who was there, it makes sense. What I want to do here is I want to jump into where you ended up in Phoenix, and that being the VP of Health and Performance. And the reason I want to go there is because then it just does a great way of highlighting how over the course of the better part of a decade, from G League to college to D League to short stint in Atlanta, Phoenix, and then getting eventually to that top leadership role. I wanted to highlight that story there. And then I really want to kind of like ask some of the more difficult questions or reflections that you may have after enduring not only the transition from when the way you ended up in that position of, hey, we're going to clean house, but we're asking you to help us, rebuild this thing. And then that leads into a pandemic year. And then that leads into you also experience ownership change, right? Things that usually don't happen in everybody's career. In the position that you were in, you had such a unique perspective over everything. And I remember talking to you about this over the years. And so briefly highlight for us what your role ended up becoming as the VP of Health and Performance. And then I want to jump into a few of those reflections because I think it'd be really valuable to learn from you on some of those situations.
Yeah, very, very, very tough period in my career in life where like you come to join a group and explicitly like just play a certain role within it. Never tried to be bigger than what myself or my role within that. But after that tough season, and you come join a group that's been there 20 years, like with Aaron Nelson and them, and like he really was like the face of that and the face of almost sports medicine. He'd been the president of the Trainers Association numerous times, and so 9 months in, I mean, here I come and I talk about timing, you know what I mean? Good or bad. But I mean, at the time it felt bad where it's like 9 months in, I just left what I thought was Atlanta and a group of guys I loved being with. And I thought maybe I'd stay there longer, but this opportunity. I couldn't turn it up. And now here we are 9 months later. And it was an interesting year. Obviously, we had the number one pick. We get DeAndre Ayton. Like, that was my first assignment, working him out before we drafted him. But man, like next thing you know, with James being the interim all year, like that was up in the air. Like we didn't know what was going to happen at the end of the season, and here we are. And a lot of up and downs, a lot of vets coming and going, young players, like good opportunities. I also worked with a head coach in Igor, who just, first time head coach. So there were so many different elements of like, this is the first. And that's great. But like, there was nobody that anybody could truly look at and say, that's our leader. This is, you know what I mean? It was just kind of looking around like, we're doing this together. So then the season ends and like they start making more permanent changes from, leadership with James as his GM. And he decides, or they decide as a management that we're going to go in a different direction. And so for us as a staff, we're told that thinking we're kind of moving on from us. And, what happens then, I never knew. Like I having conversations with the staff thinking there's an opportunity potentially in New Orleans, and next thing you know, I'm just being told, no, like, we want you to stay. And I said, okay, like, cool. And that was kind of it. Like, it wasn't like, we want you to stay in this role, this capacity. It was like, you're going to stay. And I was the only one. And next thing you know, that whole team I went to join goes to New Orleans. And they're kind of telling me they want to bring me with them. And then the Suns are telling me they want me to stay, but I'm the only one next to our equipment manager who's been there for 3 decades. And I'm just going, what does this mean? And then 3 months goes by. I'm doing everything from pre-draft workouts, summer league, you name it, daily treatments. And I'm getting nothing, like crickets. And I'm just going, what's going on around here? And then it was finally, just got to a point where I just kind of had to go and have a real conversation and just say kind of, what is this? Like I kind of had to call my shot and say, this is what I hope that you're thinking of me for. And it literally was like, as soon as I had that conversation, it was within seconds that James was like, hey, yeah, let's do it. I'm like just sitting here going, dude, are you actually like, you shitting me? Like, is this all I needed to do 3 months ago? Is like, just, and James is great, but it's like, it was just one of those things where I was like, for 3 months, we've just been sitting here living in the unknown, which is like the worst thing any of us want to live in. And so yeah, next thing you know, here I am, and it's kind of like, you've got the keys, like start building. What does it look like from a model? What are your pillars or philosophies, if you will? Like, where would you start? You know what I mean? How does this model work and operate? Things that I guess I had thought that would be a dream scenario for me, like you probably daydream about a bunch of different things if you're in a position like that, but now here it is, and definitely a very daunting, challenging time to kind of go through those things, but it was extremely healthy. And then of course that's when you were one of my first phone calls, as far as like, hey, I got to start bringing in first and foremost people that I think are very forward thinking, that are trustworthy, reliable, and that I can put my stamp of approval on. Because if there's nothing else, like, I just need good human beings around here to create a culture that makes sense. So that's kind of where we started. Obviously we had a few people that I brought with me from Atlanta that I thought were, like I said, forward thinking, and people that I felt like I had a good understanding of. If I was interested by somebody, like if I could truly learn from somebody, then I thought that's where I needed to start. And so a few of you definitely opened my eyes to a whole different world of things I had never thought of as a practitioner in Atlanta. I think Atlanta was extremely tough for me when I went in there. Like, I honestly felt like the biggest idiot I had ever felt like in my life, hanging out with the likes of you and Bronk and certain people, obviously Bove. I'm like, you guys were just, I was like, I don't even know why I'm here, but I'll just drive the equipment truck and do all the bullshit that nobody's like, I'll just do it. So, but I knew that I had to bring the right people around me, and that's kind of where it started. And I just knew I was never going to be able to build it alone. So I just felt like it started by bringing a few people that I trusted. And yeah, next thing you know, here we go. We're trying to figure it all out in the honeymoon stage of building a team and a culture and a model, and where everybody fits, and strengths and areas of improvements, and things we know we'll never quite see without experiencing. And, then we will run into COVID, so what timing to try to figure this all out when a pandemic's going on.
And then we go to the bubble, have great success in the bubble, go 8-0, can't get some help from some other teams. So we missed the playoffs, shorten off season, roll right into the next season, acquire Chris Paul, make a nice run, get to the NBA Finals. Next season, most winningest record in franchise history. And then unfortunately, we just couldn't have the success in the playoffs, the following 2 years. And then that kind of rounds out where, our time ends as our time in Phoenix, that being there was an ownership change. And now, again, same thing that happened several years ago. It's like, hey, guys, we're going to make some changes. And then that led you to in your current role working back in GCU, back in the college setting, which I like at the start of this conversation, I thought, man, this is so interesting of how you go from college, get to where you wanted to, and then you end up coming back to the college space. So there's really two last questions I want to hit on you here, just understanding the trajectory of where you've been. And that is, what is one of the lessons learned you had at your time in that one of the most challenging roles that exists in the NBA, and at times some of the most challenging times amongst the pandemic? What was one of the lessons you learned or have reflected on over the last year or so?
That's a great question. There's so many, but I the first thought that comes to mind is thinking of like the things that have, I guess, highlighted everything I've talked about, which is uncertainty. Just knowing that until you truly embrace the feeling that that you can do hard things and that you may feel like things are uncertain, but you just have to lead forward with just an open heart and open mind that you're going to be okay. Like that was the reality. We kind of build things up so much internally of things. And so that's one. I mean, obviously I've always loved in the last few years, the path I've gone with a little bit more of the mental performance space. But like Ken Revisa was a pioneer in sports psychology, and he had basically two rules, which, is just you control what you can control. Like you cannot control your performance until you control yourself. And then you just, whatever you experience, is your ability to adapt to them. So I guess the answer I would give you is, is having what I call optimistic adaptability. You know what I mean? So when you encounter some of these things, good, bad, or indifferent, it's like, how can you move forward with an optimistic ability to adapt and adjust to these things? That's all it is. That's all life is having some form of framework and a reference point to be able to move forward in an optimal way. You know what I mean? Like life's usually not as bad as we make it out to be. It's kind of just how we tell ourselves it is. So as I look back on all these places I've been, all the things I've experienced, and some of the things I thought were the toughest moments and periods of my life, like they really weren't. You know what I mean? Like it was just, you realize how much you build them up. And so it's definitely been probably one of the biggest things that I've highlighted in the last, year or so, being away from it. Because when I left the Suns, it felt like Weber State's departure, where I was just like entering a phase of burnout I'd never felt before, just because of how much comes being in that setting and the lifestyle, very well. But now that I've been away from it, a number of months now, you realize how much burnout, stress I was really building up slowly internally. And it can get to be unhealthy if you don't have a practice of release and getting away from life, that you kind of create and put on yourself.
No, man, I appreciate that perspective. And, there's, you don't really, you don't really know what you know until you maybe sometimes remove yourself from any environment, any situation. So I'm just always curious when, not even just folks like yourself, but those that just have the trajectory that you did. It's like, man, there's got to be a lesson learned. There's got to be something that you can share with us. Now back in the college setting, one quick thing I just want to touch on here briefly is definitely a different landscape than you were previously. You see a lot of talks from the outside looking in, like how NIL influence is real and how it's really part of the college setting and how the college is maybe turning into semi-pro or amateur status. So I'd really just love if you could take a minute to really just highlight so far in your experience how you're seeing the NIL impact the college setting.
Yeah, it's to say it's the wild, wild west is putting it lightly. I think we kind of now compare it to being pro sports, which you and I have seen it in pro sports, but that landscape's been developing for decades now in the NBA of what agents and all these contracts and certain things are. Here, I mean, it truly is just blown wide open. It's we're still learning so much. I mean, it feels like it is a pandemic all over again, but in proportion to NIL and pay to play and some of these things. So still a lot of unknown, but I have some great conversations, internally about what this is in comparison to the NBA. Like the men's basketball teams. Obviously, at our university, we at Grand Canyon, we don't have football. On some days we're kind of thankful for that because it comes with quite a bit to work with football. But it's interesting. There's a lot of unknowns. So I'm really interested to see in the next handful of years what this comes to from regulations and what the NCAA does, because there's some conferences who just have all the boosters and alumni in the world who've come out with some serious money. I mean, you look at a team, I'm just assuming like a Stanford and some of these big programs that come out with just countless alumni who just become millionaire, billionaire tech guys, and they got to throw their money somewhere for a little bit of tax breaks, right? So, like, I mean, some of these teams, they've got all the resources under the sun. But the saddest part for me is I was talking to my wife the other night, is there's no more building. Like what these coaches, like some very well-known coaches that went into it and have been in it for decades, are leaving on their own because it's gotten to a place where like this is not coaching anymore. Like we're not building anything. Every year, coach in Miami leaves and they just went to the Elite Eight, and he's like, man, like go to the Elite Eight. We loved each other. We had a team that loved each other. And then as soon as you finish that game, you lost in the Elite Eight. 80% of them go into the portal and they're like, hey, sorry, coach. Think we can get more, you know what I mean? And it's just kind of become something that's hard. It's hard to wrap your finger around, like, what are we building here? You know what I mean? And I think Tom Brady said it really well in a podcast somewhere where he said, they used to build programs. Now they're building teams. Like you're there 6 months and that probably more than half of that roster is just going to jump into the portal for some reason or another. And now it's almost the expectation. So we're trying to figure out what this means for us, you know what I mean? And I'm sure every program is, but yeah, it's so much unknown, going back to that, like we talked earlier, and just trying to figure it out as we go and make the best of it. Cause I feel for these head coaches trying to build something and knowing that, wins and losses really reflect their careers and taking care of their families. And it's kind of tough when you get a team put together in a blink of an eye and you've got 6 months to build this thing and have all the luck in the world from health and performance come together. And it's tough. It's tough. I envy a lot of them because what they've got to go through and develop in such a short period of time. It seems like a very almost impossible task.
It's gonna be an interesting landscape these next couple of years, even as players, decide to not pursue professional opportunities as well as, they have more opportunity in college. So it's definitely an interesting space to be, man. So listen, dude, I feel like you and I could just, it's 3:00 local time, 5:00 somewhere though, right? Like grab a beer next time and continue the conversation here. But dude, this was perfect. I really give some insight to our listeners and the audience of, hey, what's the lifespan of, someone that's really gone full circle of what a career in sports is. So, dude, this is fantastic. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point people in the right direction because you're doing some pretty cool stuff now privately. So, like, where can people get a hold of you and maybe potentially work with you as well?
Yeah, I mean, you heard a little bit about my background and more as the medical practitioner, strength coach, but definitely launching my own website here shortly. It's going to be coachbradyhowe.com. That's kind of the same handles I have for my socials. But yeah, I'm starting to work with some guys a little bit more from the outside, working in on an individual basis from a mental performance standpoint. Again, we didn't touch on this, but you and I know how significantly important it is to work with guys in that space. But you and I really have spent a lot of time with it when it comes to injury, what that means to identity, isolation, pain science, all those different things. And so I'm just starting to work with a lot more guys in that regard. And so I'm finding a lot of joy and fulfillment in that because it's definitely coming in waves. The mental performance piece, as I look at it, is what sports science was 20 years ago. Like it's going to be the next big thing that we're integrating. And so I'm having a lot of fun learning about that, and that's kind of where I'm headed now, more on the private side, along with my full-time role at GCU and husband, father.
Well, hey, man, appreciate it. That was a great way to end this conversation, giving us insights into what's coming up next for you. And we'll make sure we include that info for people. But hey, bro, it was great to connect. It's so sad that we only live, not too far from each other, but life gets in the way, man. So, hey, great catching up, dude. And we'll get you back on, man. So much more to talk about.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. I'd love to.